How many times have you heard this phrase? You can't please everyone. It depends on who you are talking to. Somewhere in the world, it is said every single day. Hello, everybody. My name is William Baker. I've been happily married for 26 years, 3 months, and 21 days. I met Julia at a Rick James concert in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1985. Julia was just beautiful. She was wearing the tightest jeans I had ever seen at the time. That's when I first learned what a camel toe was. I had heard the expression but had no idea what it meant until I met Julia. She had the sweetest smile and sparkling green eyes. It was like looking at a lake at midnight. Her eyes twinkled. I was blown away at first sight. I was at the concert with my brother, Harry, and my cousin, Mike. Harry took us along because his girlfriend, Sarah, could only go to the concert if her sisters were with her. Sarah was the oldest, Julia was the youngest, and Mike ended up with 230-pound Martha. Martha scared the hell out of me. My height was 185 pounds, and Mike was smaller than me. Aside from Martha being such a big girl, the night went great. Mike relaxed and enjoyed Martha's company. Julia and I had a great time ourselves. I hated it when the concert was over. To make a long story short, 6 months later, Julia and I got married. The wedding was a blast and didn't end until 6:30 in the morning. During the night, Julia and I sealed our vows twice before midnight and one more time before we left for our honeymoon. The next 25 years passed like a blur. I turned 46 and had 4 children. William Jr., 24, Mildred, 22, Justin, 21, and Hank, 19. I didn't really like the names Julia chose for the kids, but Mildred was her aunt's name, and the rest were from her favorite boy band. Anything to keep my wife happy, because, as the saying goes, if mommy isn't happy, nobody is. Julia was 45, and if I may say so, Julia was, is, and always will be a hot little mommy. Many of our friends found it hard to believe that Julia was the mother of 4 grown children. What they didn't know was that Julia was a certified health nut. She ran, walked, jogged, exercised, and ate right like a woman on a mission. I hate to admit it, but I had to occasionally buy little blue pills on the black market to keep up with her. Everything was going well until Hank left for college. This caused Julia to change in some ways. She started wanting sex more, started wearing very revealing clothes, and started showing off her camel toe again. First, I thought she was getting sexier for me, until I saw her on her way to work in a black micro-mini skirt. Something was going on here, and I was going to find out what it was. When Julia got home from work, I motioned for her to sit down. She looked at me and said she knew what I wanted to talk about, but she didn't have time right now. William, I have a date, so I'll talk to you in the morning. I know you're upset that I screwed you over like this, but you can either go with the flow or move out. If you file for divorce, it will cost you too much, and it will destroy the kids. I'll end up with half of everything, and you'll be left a lonely, broke old man, Julia said. It was said with a complete lack of respect, and I got the feeling that it had been long planned. For the past few years, Julia had shown signs of a lack of respect for me. Most people think that if you speak softly, you must be weak. I guess my need to stay calm was just wearing me down. But this was something else entirely. Julia must be out of her mind if she thinks she can go out, do whatever she wants, and come back like nothing happened. That's not the kind of person I am. Yeah, I was hurt, but I wasn't going to sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had seen too many people let themselves be walked over, and I wasn't going to be one of them. Over the years, I had made my stance on loyalty very clear. Julia, I'm only going to say this once. If you betray my trust, it will be the last time. She rolled her eyes and went upstairs. I went to my room and called Harry. Harry, I was hoping this day would never come, but if she goes through with it, we move forward with the plan. It was a plan we had made back in college to protect ourselves in case of a worst-case scenario. Julia didn't know the house wasn't actually in our name. It was under Harry's. His house was under Mike's, and Mike's was under mine. This arrangement kept things clear in case anything ever went wrong. While I was talking to Harry, I heard the front door slam. She had 2 hours to reconsider her choices. The next morning, Julia finally came home. It was just after 10 a.m. She had been trying to call, but I wasn't answering. As she drove, she thought about how to explain things. Last night was fun. I had a great time, but I still want my marriage to work. I just need more excitement. William loves me too much to walk away. He'll accept things eventually. That was her plan. But I had a plan of my own. When Julia got home, Harry's car was parked outside, and a U-Haul truck was in the driveway. Harry, Mike, and I were loading boxes into the truck. Julia asked, "Harry, what was going on?" Harry said, "The landlord wants you to pack your things and get out of the house." Julia got angry and tried to stop them. Harry called the police. When the police arrived, the first officer asked who the owner of the house was. William raised his hand. The officer pulled William back to the truck, and another officer led Julia around the truck so she could explain her side of the story. While she was talking to the officer, William waved his hand at Harry. William and Harry talked to the police officers for 10 minutes. The officers then discussed the situation between themselves for a few more minutes. They both approached Julia and asked her to leave the property. Julia asked, "Why am I being forced to leave the house while Harry is allowed to stay?" The officer told her that the homeowner wanted her to leave. They explained that it was a civil matter. It was not against the law to evict the owner, but if the time limit wasn't more than 30 days, she could sue him in small claims court. However, in the meantime, she had to vacate the apartment. Since her name wasn't on the title or the mortgage, she had no legal claim to stay. Julia rolled her eyes at William and walked away. William shouted, "Your stuff is going to be at your mom's house in the next 20 minutes. Julia didn't look back. As far as she was concerned, William and Harry would pay for this. Julia didn't go to her mom's house. She went to Harry's house and told his wife, Cindy, what was going on. Cindy didn't like what Julia did, but she understood her. It seemed to her, too, that life was passing her by. Cindy called Harry's cell phone and told him about what was happening with William and his silly pride. Cindy informed Harry that sometimes women's lives take a turn, and they might break a few rules while trying to find themselves. Harry sat and listened to his wife, then replied, "Cindy, if by breaking rules you mean spending too much money, breaking my truck, or quitting my job and lying about it, then those are rules I can live with. But if you're talking about going out and sleeping with a few guys, then you're not the woman I married, and we need to go our separate ways." Cindy thought about what Harry had just told her. Harry worked, paid all the bills, she had credit cards and access to all the money. Not to mention, Harry made love to her 3 or 4 times a week. When she started to feel old, like she was no longer sexy, Harry would come over, drop her off anywhere available, and shake the hell out of her. It didn't happen often, but when it did, she felt so sexy. She was on top of the world. They went on vacations all over the world. Cindy thought about it for about 45 seconds. How would I live without Harry? Cindy shook her head, as if trying to shake off a cobweb. My life doesn't pass me by. Harry is my life. Cindy asked Harry what time he would be home. Harry replied, "In a couple of hours." Cindy agreed, told Harry she loved him, and said goodbye. Then, with fire in her eyes, Cindy looked at Julia. "Get the hell out, Julia. You dumbass. You ruined your life, and now you're trying to ruin mine? I love my husband. He takes care of me, pays for everything we have, and has never complained once. He put our 3 kids through college and helped each of them buy their first car. He treats me like a queen, and because you wasted time playing around, you ruined your life. Did you know William was planning to take you to Spain? Get out of my house before I make the mistake of joining you." Julia was beginning to think that maybe this had all been a mistake. She left Cindy's house and went to her mother's. Meanwhile, Cindy had other plans. She headed to the mall, determined to remind herself of everything she had. She picked out the most stylish and flattering outfit she could find, smiling at her reflection in the mirror. "I'm not throwing my life away for foolishness." She then stopped by a bookstore and picked up a couple of romance novels. That evening, when Harry walked into the house, he found Cindy waiting for him, looking radiant. She smiled and said, "I hope you're ready for a wonderful night." Needless to say, Harry had a great evening. William didn't hear from Harry until Monday. Now that Julia was out of the house, it was time for the next part of his plan. The next step was to make sure she understood the consequences of her choices. The pain she had caused him was unbearable, but William refused to dwell on the past. Julia needed to see that actions had repercussions. When Julia arrived at her mother's house, she tried to convince herself she was in control. "William won't know what hit him when I'm done. I'm gonna come out on top. He'll regret ever letting me go." But as days passed, she started to wonder why William hadn't reached out. She had sent texts, emails, and countless messages, yet nothing. She knew he had seen them. "He's just being stubborn," she thought. "He can't live without me." At that very moment, William was thinking about her, but not in the way she imagined. He wasn't reminiscing about their past. He was questioning why he had tolerated so much for so long. Julia's mother, observing her daughter's behavior, sighed. She wondered how long Julia had been living in denial. It was time for a reality check. "Life isn't a fairy tale, Julia. Do you have a maid?" The question pulled Julia from her thoughts. "A maid?" she repeated, confused. "Yes. Do you have one?" "No, ma'am," Julia admitted. "Then get up and help around here. There are things that need to be done." Julia had no choice but to listen. For days later, she was exhausted from her mother's constant instructions. "Clean this. Organize that. Stop wasting time." Julia didn't know how much more she could take. Then, as she stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, a man approached her. "Julia Baker?" She didn't recognize him, but he clearly knew her. "Yes, that's me," she said, offering a polite smile. He handed her an envelope. "You've been served," he said before walking away. Julia stood frozen, staring at the papers in her hand, realizing that her problems had only just begun. Service. What was serviced? Thought Julia. Julia's mom went outside to check on her and found her passed out in the front yard. In her hands were William's divorce papers. Without hesitation, Julia's mom turned on the water hose and splashed her face. Julia gasped and jolted awake, blinking rapidly. She looked at the papers and, for a moment, seemed like she was going to faint again, until her mom splashed her once more. "Julia, get up and get in the house. Stop lying in the yard like this." "Mom, what should I do?" Julia asked weakly. Her mom crossed her arms. "Julia, I blame your father. He spent years filling your head with fairy tales, making you believe life would always be perfect. If we had taught you to be strong and independent instead of letting him spoil you, you wouldn't be here now." Julia looked down. "You know how your father and I grew up. Life on the farm was tough. Long days, hard work, and barely enough rest. Your father wanted better for you, so he sacrificed to give you a life he never had. And instead of honoring that, you threw it all away." Her mother's voice softened slightly. "Your father loved William like a son. If he were alive today, he'd be heartbroken to see this. And do you know why? Because this isn't just about the divorce, Julia. It's about you not realizing what you had." Julia swallowed hard. "I listened to you blame William, but tell me, how is this his fault? He stood by you through everything. He's loyal, hardworking, and never once turned his back on you. And now, you've let him go because of your own doubts and insecurities." Her mom shook her head. "Let me ask you something. Where are all those people who told you life would be better without him? Where are the ones who convinced you to throw everything away?" She looked around dramatically. "I don't see them here. But do you know where your husband is? He's in that house you used to call home. And don't think for a second that he doesn't miss you. But not for long. Soon enough, someone else will see what you couldn't. A woman who appreciates his loyalty, his kindness, and his strength. And she will make sure he never thinks about you again." Julia flinched, the weight of her mother's words sinking in. Her mother sighed. "I hate talking to you like this, Julia, but you have to wake up. Life isn't as simple as you thought it was. And now, you're about to face reality. A harsh reality. Julia sat at a table across from William and his attorney. She had hired John Patterson, a well-known lawyer famous for securing large settlements for his clients. She hoped that if she pushed hard enough, William would reconsider. Maybe if she demanded more, he'd agree to counseling instead. Maybe he'd call off the divorce. John glanced at William's attorney, trying to place his face. Something about him felt familiar. Then William's lawyer spoke. "Mr. Patterson, my name is Kyle Jacobs. I will be representing Mr. Baker." John's stomach dropped. He knew that name. Kyle Jacobs was one of the top divorce attorneys in the country. A senior partner at Jacobs, Jackson, Beard and Hall, one of the most powerful law firms on Wall Street. "Excuse me," John muttered. "My client and I need a moment." Julia followed him into the hallway, confused. "What's wrong?" John's expression was grave. "Julia, is your husband wealthy?" She frowned. "Not wealthy, but we do fine." "Why?" John exhaled. "Because the lawyer sitting across from us is a legend. He's represented senators, billionaires, and Fortune 500 executives. His last case? The wife of a man worth $12 billion demanded half. Kyle got her to settle for an apartment and a modest payout." Julia's breath caught in her throat. "Half of his legal team consists of former judges," John continued. "His personal attorney is a former Supreme Court justice." Julia's hands started to shake. For the first time, she realized just how much trouble she was in. Inside the conference room, William leaned back, relaxed. "You know, you should call me and Mike more often," Kyle said. "After all, we're family." John and Julia exchanged shocked glances. They hadn't known. Kyle, Mike, Harry, and William were cousins. Julia's stomach twisted. The last time they had met was 10 years ago. She remembered it well, because back then she had refused to go. She had made excuses, convinced herself that it didn't matter. But now, she wondered if she had already been making mistakes back then. Back at the house, William and Kyle discussed an upcoming golf trip. Julia could barely focus. Kyle turned to John. "You asked me what I had planned for my client?" John nodded hesitantly. Kyle smiled. "It's simple. Julia will walk out of here with the clothes on her back. Nothing more and nothing less." John didn't realize there was no one to bargain with. Harry owned the house. Julia had her own car, her own checking and savings account, as did William, so there was nothing left. Julia just didn't know it. Julia jumped up and exclaimed, "No way he can have it all. I just want William back." Then she took a deep breath and calmed down. "William, talk to me alone for a few minutes, please." William looked at Kyle and nodded. Both lawyers left the room. "William, I'm so sorry. I ruined a beautiful marriage and hurt the man I love. I will sign everything over to you. I don't care about any of this. I just want you back. I don't want to lose you. Please, I'm begging you. Think about it. Don't end us without trying." William looked at Julia. She had always been beautiful to him, but now all he saw was the weight of the past. And yet he still cared for her. William turned to the lawyers. "Go back into the house." He faced Julia. "Sign the papers. You will get nothing, no alimony, no pension, nothing. If you do, we won't file them immediately. They'll be held in a safety deposit box for 1 year. You made this mistake, and you're gonna have to fix it. 1 year, and if things don't change, you're out. Do you agree?" Julia hesitated for a moment. "Where do I sign?" John warned her. "Once you sign, you can't take it back." Julia signed everything away for a chance to prove to William that she still loved him. "William, I lost my way, but I would do anything for a chance to make things right." William remained silent. William and Kyle left. Julia felt hopeful as she went to her mom's house to gather her belongings. After packing everything she could carry into the car, she drove home, humming to herself the whole way. William would never regret giving her this chance. When Julia pulled up to the house, a note was hanging on the door. "Julia, come in. Make yourself at home." She smiled and thought, William still cares. Maybe he's planning something special. The note continued, "Julia, watch the video. Just press play." Have a glass of wine while you watch, you might need it. Julia did as the note instructed. On the screen, William appeared, sitting calmly in a chair. Julia, I've loved you most of my life. You're the mother of my children. You were my greatest love. But you took that love for granted, chasing something you thought was missing. In doing so, you broke what we had. Now I need time. Time to rediscover myself, to heal, and to see if we can ever find our way back. If you truly believe in us, endure this year. If you can, I'll come back. If not, well, life moves forward. The first month was incredibly difficult for Julia, but she held on. The second month, she received another video from William. He looked more confident, more at ease. At the end, he simply said, "Stay strong. I'm rooting for you." By the fifth month, Julia was still waiting, still believing that William would return. One evening, there was a knock at the door. When Julia answered, it was Kyle. He handed her a letter. Kyle looked at Julia with sympathy. "If it's worth it, I'm sorry." Then he walked away. Julia sat down, her hands trembling as she opened the letter. "Julia, as much as it pains me to say this, I'm filing for divorce. You lost your way, and our marriage suffered for it. For the past 5 months, I've been searching for answers. All I know now is that I need peace. But I also know this, I don't want to close the door completely. If we're meant to find our way back, it will happen with time. For now, I need space. Please understand. Asterisk asterisk. Julia reread the letter. Her heart pounded. It said William was upstairs. She ran to the bathroom, washed her face, took a deep breath and went upstairs. She paused in front of the bedroom door. Please don't let this be a cruel joke. She opened it. William wasn't there. Her heart sank. Then she heard the shower turn off, followed by the soft creak of the bathroom door. William stepped out, drying his hands with a towel. "Why are you crying?" he asked gently. Julia froze. William had changed. He looked healthier, stronger, more confident than she had ever seen him. Julia blinked, taking in the sight of the man she had almost lost. William helped her up, and for the first time in months they embraced. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time Julia felt hope. Last week, William and Julia celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. When their great-grandchildren asked about their secret to love, William simply smiled and said, "Sometimes, love needs to break before it can be rebuilt stronger."